The first time I saw my sister's face being used to ask strangers for money, I was standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee in my hand, wearing one of her old army sweatshirts because it was the only thing that still smelled faintly like the cedar chest where my mother kept her folded memorial things. I was scrolling through a veterans support group I followed online, half awake, half bracing myself for the kind of posts that always made my chest tighten. My name is Patricia Kowalski, and that morning was when I discovered that my aunt had been running a fake veterans charity for more than a year using my late sister's name, photograph, and military service record without our knowledge or permission. Photos from memorial runs, fundraisers for Gold Star families, scholarship announcements. Sometimes I clicked, sometimes I kept scrolling because grief has a way of ambushing you even on ordinary mornings. Then I saw a fundraising post honoring fallen service members, and there was my sister, Rachel Kowalski, in her dress uniform, smiling with that serious little lift at the corner of her mouth like she was trying not to laugh. Under her photo was a campaign for something called the Rachel Kowalski Memorial Veterans Family Scholarship Fund. I had never heard of it. My mother had never mentioned it. My father certainly would have told me. And the post was not just sharing her picture, it used her rank, her deployment history, the date she died, and a line about how her loving family had created this fund to carry her legacy forward. I read that sentence over and over until the words stopped looking real. Her loving family. I was her family. Not a misunderstanding. Not a memorial page someone shared too widely. A fundraising campaign with donation buttons, emotional copy, donor comments, and updates that made it sound like scholarship applications were being reviewed and veteran families were being helped. Rachel had died in service 4 years earlier, and my Aunt Denise had been at every memorial since then. She had cried beside my mother at the cemetery. She had brought casseroles. She had worn a little gold star pin on patriotic holidays and spoken softly about how Rachel deserved to be remembered. She had also, as I would learn, been taking money from people who believed they were supporting a legitimate memorial organization. At first, my body wanted to move faster than my mind. I wanted to call her right then and scream until my throat gave out. I wanted to type under the post that this was fraud, that no one in our family had approved it, that Rachel's name was not a tool for anyone's debt or pride or whatever excuse might be hiding behind it. But the longer I looked at the campaign page, the colder I got. It had been active for 14 months. There were dozens and dozens of donors. Some gave $10 with a comment about their own veteran son. Some gave $500 and wrote that Rachel's story moved them to tears. There were updates from the organization thanking supporters for making scholarships possible. There was a logo with a flag and a silhouette of a woman in uniform. There was a mailing address I recognized as my aunt's rented office space from a short-lived bookkeeping business she had once run. If I confronted Denise before I understood what I was looking at, she could delete everything, move money, invent paperwork, or convince other relatives that I was overreacting because grief had made me paranoid. So I did the hardest thing I had done in a long time. I took screenshots. I clicked every tab. I saved the donor list that was visible, the campaign updates, the comments, the platform profile, the tax language, the photos, and the contact page. I forwarded everything to a private email account and put my phone face down on the counter because my hands were shaking so badly. I was afraid I would drop it. Rachel was 29 when she died. She had been my older sister by 3 years, which meant she had spent most of our childhood acting as if she had been personally hired to manage my survival. She taught me how to ride a bike by running beside me and lying that she was still holding the seat long after she had let go. She checked my math homework with a red pen like she was grading military documents. She joined the Army after college, not because she came from a military family, but because she wanted structure, purpose, and a way to pay for graduate school later. She was disciplined, funny, stubborn, and deeply private about the parts of service that were hard. When she died overseas, our family did not become noble or inspiring. We became broken. My mother stopped sleeping in her bedroom for months because she said the walls were too quiet. My father started fixing things that were not broken. I became the person who handled paperwork because I could not fix death, but I could answer calls, organize files, and keep track of forms. That is why the campaign page felt like a second theft. Denise had not just taken a photo. She had taken our family role in Rachel's memory and written herself into the center of it. My aunt was my mother's younger sister. Denise Palmer had always been the kind of woman who could make a room revolve around her without seeming loud. She had a smooth voice, careful clothes, and a talent for sounding wounded whenever anyone questioned her. Growing up, I knew her as the aunt who arrived late to Thanksgiving with expensive pies and dramatic stories about how hard her week had been. After Rachel died, Denise changed in a way that seemed, at the time, almost tender. She visited my mother often. She offered to help with memorial arrangements. She said she wanted to start something someday in Rachel's honor, maybe a foundation for military families or young women pursuing public service. My father had said, gently, that we were not ready. I had agreed. It sounded like one of those grief promises people make because they need a future tense to survive the present. I thought the idea had stayed there, in vague conversations and someday language. Instead, Denise had turned it into a public donation machine. I called my parents after I had gathered the first batch of evidence, but I did not tell them everything yet. That may sound strange, but my mother had a heart condition that had worsened after Rachel died, and my father was protective enough to drive straight to Denise's house if I said the word fraud. I asked my mother if Aunt Denise had ever talked to her recently about a scholarship fund. My mother sounded tired but calm. She said, "No, honey." She mentioned years ago that Rachel should have one, but we never did anything. Why? I said I had seen something online that looked odd and I was checking it before worrying anyone. My mother went quiet. Then she said, "Patricia, is someone using Rachel's picture?" I did not lie. I said, "I think so, and I am going to find out exactly what it is." My father got on the extension, and I could hear the chair scrape as he sat down. He said, "Do not call Denise until we know." That was my father. Quiet, furious, practical. By 8:30 that morning, I had called an attorney named Priscilla Nakamura. She had helped a coworker of mine with a nonprofit dispute, and the coworker had once told me, "If anything ever gets legally ugly but emotionally uglier, call Priscilla." That turned out to be the most accurate recommendation I had ever received. Priscilla listened without interrupting while I explained the campaign page, the use of Rachel's photo, the service information, the claim that the family had created the fund, and the fact that no one in our immediate family knew it existed. She asked precise questions. Was the campaign still live? Yes. Did it claim tax-deductible status? In some places, yes, though the wording was vague. Did it name board members? No. Did it list a registered nonprofit number? Not that I could find. Did it have a bank account shown? No. Only the platform donation system. Did I know the person behind the mailing address? Yes, my aunt. Priscilla said, "Do not confront her yet. If this is legitimate, there will be registration records, an EIN, bank records, board minutes, some kind of structure. If it is not legitimate, the money trail will matter." She recommended a forensic accountant named Cornelius Akibi, a calm, methodical man whose voice made even terrible information sound like it had been placed in neat folders. Cornelius asked me to send him every screenshot, link, and name connected to the campaign. He said a legitimate charity would leave footprints, state registration, federal filings, a bank account held by an entity, clear fund allocation, payment processor records, maybe scholarship disbursement records. A fake charity might still have a pretty website, but it would usually collapse when compared with formal filings and actual money movement. Over the next week, I learned more about charitable fraud than I ever wanted to know. Priscilla checked state nonprofit databases. Cornelius checked the campaign platform, business records, public filings, and the financial identifiers attached to the organization name. There was no registered nonprofit called the Rachel Kowalski Memorial Veterans Family Scholarship Fund. There was no charitable solicitation registration. There was no scholarship board, no application portal beyond a page saying applications were currently under review, no public criteria, no partner school, no veterans organization receiving funds. The campaign page used words like mission, legacy, and family, but behind those words was nothing formal enough to hold a dollar honestly. The first real break came when Cornelius connected the payment processor information to an account controlled by Denise personally. Not a nonprofit account, not a trust, not even a separate business entity with sloppy paperwork. Personal control. He could not access private bank details without legal process, but through platform records, public transaction references, and documents. Priscilla requested through proper channels once the platform became involved. He pieced together the total. Just over $31,000 had been raised across 14 months. Most of it had been transferred out shortly after donation batches cleared. The destination accounts were connected to Denise. There was no evidence of scholarships, grants, veteran family assistance, or charitable disbursements. While Cornelius worked, Priscilla suggested we hire a private investigator to answer a different question. How had Denise gotten Rachel's official service photograph and detailed record for the campaign materials? Some of the information could have come from her obituary, But the campaign used a high-resolution version of Rachel's dress uniform portrait and a cropped image from a memorial slideshow that had only been shared with family and close friends. The investigator, Marisol Vance, was a former insurance fraud investigator with the patient expression of a woman who had heard every bad excuse people could invent. Marisol reviewed the campaign materials and traced the images back to our family's shared online memorial page. That page had been created after Rachel's funeral, so relatives across the country could view photos, leave memories, and see details for memorial events. It was not fully public in the way a social media page is public, but it was accessible to anyone with the link, and Denise had the link. Marisol found that the exact file names and image dimensions matched downloads from that memorial page. Denise had taken photographs meant for private grieving and used them in public fundraising solicitations. That discovery hurt almost as much as the money. My mother had spent nights choosing those photos. She had asked me whether including Rachel's official portrait felt too formal or too painful. I remember telling her that Rachel had earned that uniform, and there was no shame in showing it. We put it there for family. We put it there so cousins' children who barely remembered her could someday see the full shape of who she had been. Denise looked at the same page and saw credibility. The weeks between finding the post and receiving Cornelius's full trace were some of the strangest of my life, because ordinary family life continued while a hidden crime sat between us. My cousin had a birthday dinner at a restaurant in Cleveland, and Denise was there in a navy blouse, laughing too loudly at my uncle by marriage's jokes, hugging my mother, and telling the table that Rachel would have loved the little flag centerpiece near the cake. I sat across from her with my napkin twisted in my lap and watched her perform grief like it was a language she had practiced. My mother did not know the full amount yet. My father knew enough to say almost nothing. At one point, Denise touched my wrist and said, "You have been quiet tonight, Trish. Everything all right?" I looked at her hand on my skin and thought of strangers giving $25 because they believed Rachel's family had asked them to help. I said, "I have had a lot on my mind." Denise sighed and said, "Your sister's anniversary is always hard." The nerve of that sentence almost made me stand up. Instead, I smiled in a way that hurt my face and said, "Yes, it is." Later that night, in the parking lot, my father put both hands on the roof of his car and lowered his head. He said, "I do not know how you sat through that." I said, "Because if I start before we have everything, she will make herself the victim." My father nodded, and that was when I understood he knew Denise better than I had wanted to admit. When Cornelius finally delivered the full preliminary report, he did it over a video call with Priscilla present. He laid out the timeline. 14 months earlier, Denise had created the campaign under a memorial organization name. The first donations came from local community members, including people from church, a veterans auxiliary group, and friends of friends who recognized Rachel's name from the news coverage after her death. Then the campaign spread through online veterans support groups, especially after Denise posted an update claiming the fund was expanding scholarship eligibility to children of fallen service members nationwide. Donations increased around Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and the anniversary of Rachel's death. The campaign had collected a little more than $31,000. After platform fees, nearly all available funds had been transferred to Denise-controlled accounts. Cornelius found no outgoing payments consistent with scholarships, no checks to schools, no electronic payments to families, no administrative expenses that made sense for a charity. Instead, the timing of withdrawals appeared to line up with personal expenses, debt payments, and cash transfers. Cornelius did not speculate beyond the records, but the picture was clear enough. Priscilla said, "This is not a paperwork mistake." I stared at the report until Rachel's name blurred. My mother began crying quietly. My father asked, "What happens now?" Priscilla said we had choices. We could confront Denise privately and demand restitution, but that risked evidence destruction and gave her time to manipulate donors. We could report the campaign to the platform immediately, submit the evidence, and request a freeze. We could also contact local authorities because the campaign involved fraudulent solicitation, identity misuse, and unauthorized use of military service information in promotional materials. Because Rachel's name and service were central to the fraud, Priscilla recommended formal reporting rather than a family-only resolution. My mother whispered, "She used my child." No one answered because there was nothing to add. Before we filed, I asked for one direct confrontation, not because I wanted to protect Denise, and not because I thought she would confess out of decency. I needed to see her face when she understood that Rachel's little sister knew. Priscilla did not love the idea, but she agreed on conditions. I would not go alone. I would not threaten her. I would not promise anything. I would bring printed copies of the campaign page, the registration search results, and Cornelius's summary, and I would keep the conversation focused. My father wanted to come. My mother insisted she could not be in the room. In the end, it was me, my father, and Priscilla at Denise's apartment on a gray Thursday afternoon. Denise opened the door wearing reading glasses and a cardigan, looking mildly annoyed until she saw Priscilla's briefcase. She said, "What is this?" I said, "We need to talk about the Rachel Kowalski Memorial Veterans Family Scholarship Fund." Her face changed by half an inch, that was all, a tiny tightening around her mouth. Then she stepped back and said, "Come in." Her living room was tidy, with a framed photo of Rachel on the bookshelf. I had seen that photo at my mother's house years ago. I wondered when Denise had copied it. Priscilla placed the documents on the coffee table. I stayed standing because I did not trust my legs if I sat. I said, "You created a fundraising campaign using Rachel's name and service photo. You wrote that her family created it. We did not. You collected over $31,000. There is no registered nonprofit. There are no scholarships. The money went to accounts you control." Explain it. Denise looked at my father first, as if he might be softer than me. He was not. He said, "Answer her." Denise picked up the first page and set it down again. She said, "It was supposed to become real." I felt something inside me go very still. I said, "What was supposed to become real?" She said, "The foundation, the scholarship, all of it." I meant to set it up properly, but things got complicated. Priscilla asked, "Did you register a nonprofit entity?" Denise said, "Not yet." "Did you create a scholarship account?" "I was going to." "Did you distribute any funds to veteran families or students?" Denise swallowed. "No, but I planned to once I got stable." My father said, "Stable from what?" Denise's eyes filled with tears, and for one wild second I thought she was about to talk about grief. Instead she said she had debts, credit cards, a business loan from the bookkeeping office that failed. Medical bills, she said, were not fully covered. She said it started small, that she made a post around Memorial Day intending to see whether people would even respond. And when donations came in, she told herself she would borrow from the fund temporarily and pay it back before launching the real scholarship. Then more donations came. Then she needed more time. Then she updated the campaign because donors expected news. She said it like the lie had grown on its own, like she had been dragged behind it rather than typing every word. I asked, "Did you ever ask my mother for permission to use Rachel's photo?" Denise said, "Your mother would have said no because she was not ready." I said, "So you knew you did not have consent." She said, "I knew she was grieving." That answer showed me the whole shape of her selfishness. She had taken my mother's grief and treated it as an obstacle to get around. My father, who rarely raised his voice, said, "We were all grieving. You stole from strangers using my daughter's grave." Denise began to cry harder. She said, "I loved Rachel too." I said, "Do not use love as the word for this." She tried then to turn toward me as if we were just family having a painful misunderstanding. She said, "Trish, I know you are angry, but I can fix it. I can start the paperwork now. I can make the fund legitimate. I can pay it back over time. We do not need to ruin the family over this." That was when I finally sat down, because my anger had sharpened into something clear. I said, "You ruined this when you made Rachel's death into a payment plan." Priscilla told Denise the campaign would be reported to the platform and authorities, and that she should preserve all records, communications, and financial documents. Denise asked if my mother knew. My father said, "She knows enough." Denise covered her face and said, "She will never forgive me." I said, "That is not the problem we came here to solve." We left without hugging her, without accepting coffee, without letting her walk us to the door. In the car, my father sat in the passenger seat while I drove, and neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then he said, "Your sister would be proud of how you held yourself." I almost had to pull over. The formal reporting moved faster than I expected once. Priscilla submitted the evidence. The fundraising platform froze the campaign first. The public page disappeared and was replaced by a notice that the fundraiser was under review. Remaining funds that had not yet been transferred were frozen for potential donor refunds. The platform requested verification documents from Denise, which she could not provide because there were none. Priscilla sent them Cornelius's trace, Marisol's image documentation, and the lack of nonprofit registration. Local authorities opened a fraud investigation, and because the campaign had solicited donations across state lines through online groups, the matter became more serious than Denise had apparently imagined. I will not pretend the process was clean or emotionally satisfying every day. It was humiliating to contact donors. It was exhausting to explain that the real Rachel Kowalski family had not received their money, had not created the campaign, and had not selected scholarship recipients. Some donors were kind immediately. One man wrote back that he had given because his son served in Rachel's unit and he wanted her remembered well. He said, "I am sorry your family has to carry this on top of everything else." I cried over that email for half an hour. Other donors were confused or suspicious. A woman from a veterans auxiliary group asked whether this was a family dispute over control of the money. I understood the question, but it still stung. I sent her the platform notice and Priscilla's contact information, and eventually she apologized. A few people never responded at all, perhaps embarrassed, perhaps tired of scams, perhaps unwilling to revisit a donation they had made in good faith. My mother took it the hardest. She kept asking how Denise could sit beside her at memorial events knowing what she was doing. I did not have an answer that would help. My mother and Denise had shared a bedroom as girls. They had fought over clothes, protected each other from a harsh father, whispered about boys, stood as bridesmaids in each other's weddings. After Rachel died, my mother thought her sister was one of the few people who could sit with her pain without trying to solve it. Learning that Denise had been using that closeness to gather details and borrow legitimacy changed something in my mother that I could not repair. She removed Denise's number from her favorites. She took down a framed childhood photo of the two of them from the hallway, not dramatically, just quietly one afternoon. My father found it in a drawer and did not put it back. Denise's reactions came in waves. First came the apologies. Long texts to me, to my father, to my mother, saying she had made terrible choices but had never meant to dishonor Rachel. We did not answer except through Priscilla. Then came the explanation sent through relatives. She had been under financial pressure. She had intended to repay it. She had been overwhelmed. She had loved Rachel like a daughter. Then came the anger. My cousin called me one night and said his mother was saying I had brought police into a family matter because I wanted to control Rachel's legacy. I told him to ask her for the names of the scholarship recipients. He went quiet. 2 days later, he called back and said, "She will not give me any." I said, "Because there are none." That was the pattern. Every defense collapsed when it touched facts. No registration, no board, no separate account, no scholarships, no consent, no truth. Cornelius closed his review with a final report that Priscilla used for the authorities and the platform. He told me something I still think about. He said fraudulent charities built around real, sympathetic causes are especially effective because the emotional truth of the story hides the financial lie. Rachel was real. Her service was real. Our grief was real. Donors recognized genuine sacrifice and assumed the campaign built around it must be genuine too. They did not question because questioning a memorial can feel cruel. Denise counted on that. She counted on people being decent. She counted on Rachel's uniform doing the work that legal documents would have failed to do. The investigation did not bring all the money back. Some remaining funds were refunded through the platform, and some donors were able to dispute charges depending on timing and payment method. Denise was ordered to provide financial records, and the legal process continued beyond the first few months in ways I cannot fully describe because parts of it stayed formal and slow. What I can say is that the campaign was shut down permanently, the organization name was flagged, and Denise faced a formal fraud case instead of a family scolding. She also became someone our family no longer invited into spaces where Rachel's memory was present. That boundary upset some relatives. One aunt said excluding Denise from the annual cemetery visit was harsh because Denise was already suffering. My mother answered that Rachel had no choice in being used, but Denise had choices every day for 14 months. No one argued after that. The hardest decision came later, after the fake campaign was gone. Priscilla asked whether we wanted to reserve Rachel's name properly so it could not be used again in the same way. At first I wanted nothing to do with foundations, scholarship language, donation pages, or public memorials. The words had been poisoned, but then I thought about the donors who had written kind notes. I thought about young women in military families who might actually benefit from the kind of scholarship Denise had only pretended to create. I thought about Rachel, who had once mailed me a check for $200 when I was in college and too proud to admit I was short on rent. The memo line had said, "Stop eating vending machine crackers." That was Rachel's kind of care, practical, teasing, and immediate. So, with my parents' agreement, we created a real fund. Not quickly, not emotionally on a weekend with a donation button and a borrowed logo, properly. Priscilla helped with the legal structure. Cornelius recommended a small accounting firm that worked with nonprofits. We registered the entity, established a board that included my parents, me, Rachel's former commanding officer, and a local community college administrator. We created written criteria for scholarships supporting daughters and sisters of service members pursuing nursing, public service, education, or skilled trades. We opened a dedicated bank account. We set up transparent reporting, annual summaries, and a strict rule that no family member could be paid from the fund. We used Rachel's name only after my mother chose the exact wording. We used her photo only on one page, with context, dignity, and consent from the people who loved her most. The first legitimate scholarship was not large. It was $2,000 awarded to a 22-year-old named Elena, whose father had served with Rachel years earlier. Elena wanted to become a paramedic. At the small presentation, my mother held the certificate with both hands, and for the first time since the fraud surfaced, I saw her smile at Rachel's name without flinching. Elena's mother hugged my mother and said, "Your daughter is helping mine." That sentence did not erase what Denise had done, but it gave Rachel's name back some of its weight. It made the word legacy feel less like bait and more like work. Denise eventually sent one handwritten letter. Priscilla reviewed it first because that had become our rule. It was not a full confession in the way I wanted. People like Denise rarely give you the clean moral ending you imagine. She wrote that she was ashamed, that debt had made her desperate, that once people praised her for honoring Rachel, she felt trapped by the image of herself as someone doing good. She wrote that she understood if my mother never spoke to her again. My mother read the letter once, folded it, and put it in a file with the legal papers. She did not cry. She did not respond. I asked later whether she wanted to burn it or throw it away. She said, "No, it belongs with the evidence." That was when I realized my mother had moved from heartbreak into clarity. As for me, I still follow some veteran support groups, but I read fundraisers differently now. I look for registration numbers, clear financial information, real contacts, and transparency. I do not believe every memorial campaign is false. Many are run by honest people doing needed work, but I know how easily grief can be packaged by someone willing to stand close enough to the truth to steal its shadow. I know that a familiar last name does not make a person safe. I know that love without honesty is just another costume. People sometimes ask whether I miss Denise. The honest answer is complicated. I miss the aunt I thought I had, the woman who brought soup when my mother could not eat, who told stories about Rachel as a bossy 7-year-old, who seemed to understand that grief does not end just because the funeral flowers dry. But I do not miss managing her excuses. I do not miss watching my mother wonder which memories were real. I do not miss the version of family that requires silence so the person who caused harm can stay comfortable. Rachel served under her own name. She earned her uniform, her record, and the respect people felt when they saw her photograph. Denise tried to turn that respect into a private account balance. She failed because one early morning, a support group post landed in front of the wrong sister. I wish I had never had to become the person who gathered screenshots of my sister's stolen face. I wish donors had never had to learn that their kindness had been exploited. I wish my mother had been spared one more betrayal tied to the child she already lost. But I am proud that we did not let shame keep us quiet. We froze what could be frozen. We reported what needed reporting. We told donors the truth. And then we built something real where the lie had been. If you had found your sister's service photo being used by someone in your own family to collect donations, would you have confronted her first, or would you have gone straight to the authorities? I still wonder whether there is a perfect way to handle betrayal when it comes wearing a familiar face. Share this story with someone who believes family secrets should never matter more than the truth. Thank you for listening, and if you want more stories about women standing up when grief, money, and family loyalty collide, subscribe for the next one. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the names entrusted to you.